The time is now 6 p.m. and I hereby call the regular meeting of the Madera City Council to order. City Clerk, will you please do the roll call?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Garcia is absent this evening. Mayor Pro Tem Mejia.
Here.
Councilmember Gallegos.
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Montes. Absent.
Here.
Councilmember Villegas.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will now have the invocation led by Reverend Sam Neely of Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church.
Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight, Father, once again, asking for your blessings on this meeting, Father, of this special city. Father, we look upon this city with your mercy and your grace. We ask that you bless this meeting, bless all of the council members today, bless all of the attendees. Father, we just hope that we stay civil and in decent and in order. And we give you the praise, honor, and glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Gallegos.
Ready, salute.
To the flag of the United States of America, from which it stands, one nation under God.
Thank you, Reverend Neely, and thank you, Councilmember Gallegos. I will now ask my colleagues if they have any changes to the agenda. I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues.
I so move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Gallegos, seconded by Councilwoman Evans. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Ayes have it. We will now go on to public comment. The first 15 minutes of the meeting are reserved for members of the public to address the council on items which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers will be asked, but are not required, to identify themselves and state the subject of their comments. If the subject is an item on the agenda, the mayor has the option of asking the speaker to hold a comment until that item is called. Comments on items listed as a public hearing on the agenda should be held until the hearing is opened. The council is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusions should be drawn if the council does not respond to public comment at this time. I will now open public comment.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council, Chief Matt Watson with Madera City Fire. The city was actually recognized for a Silver Design Award for Station 58. So it's based on different sizes of departments and cities, but Madera City Station 58 got a silver award for the size of fire department for us. So it's a great accomplishment for the city, and this plaque will remain at Station 58 on the wall. So thank you guys for such a great fire station.
Very good. Very good.
Do we have any additional public comment?
Mayor Pro Tem, I do not see anything in writing. Mark, is there anyone online?
There's no one on Zoom right now.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay. With no additional public comment, I will now close the public comment and we will move on. We have no presentations today. The first item on the agenda is a workshop on Clean California State Beautification Program, and this is going to be presented by Jennifer Nishikawa, Brad Cole, and Joseph Herbert.
Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem, simply for the record, please let the record reflect that Councilmember Montes is on the dais. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Nishikawa. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem and council members. First, I'd like to share my screen. Are you able to see
We can.
the title of the City of Madera State Route 99 Clean California project?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. My name is Jennifer Nishikawa, and I am the District 6 Clean California Coordinator. I'm here tonight with members of our Caltrans team, John Liu, our Deputy District Director of Maintenance and Operations, Brad Cole, the District 6 Landscape Architect, Erica Flores, our District 6 PIO, and we've been working in partnership with Joseph Hebert, the Interim Parks and Community Services Director for the City of Madera. Thank you for allowing us to present on the City of Madera's State Route 99 Clean California Block Wall project tonight. First, I'd like to highlight the Clean California program. The Clean California program focuses on 4 key action areas throughout the state: eradication, education, and engagement and enhancement. First, for eradication, we are expanding our litter pickup. We have 4 state-staffed litter crews, and our crews are currently home-based in Fresno, Delano, Lemoore, and Bakersfield. We also have 7 special program crews, with 2 more coming online in the spring. These crews are currently located in Madera, Bakersfield, Lemoore, Visalia, Mendota, and Delano. We've also hosted numerous dump days, with 2 upcoming dump days in Madera, and they are scheduled for the North Fork Transfer Station in North Fork on February 11th, and in the Fairmead Landfill in Chowchilla on March 11th. For our Adoptive Highway program, we have 150 new enrollments in District 6 for our Adoptive Highway program as part of the Clean California program. And we're also educating the public through hiring outreach coordinators to reach out to communities. And we're planning for a statewide community day of action on March 25th. Next, I'll talk about engagement and enhancement through our 2 beautification programs. We have the state program and the local grant program. For our beautification local grant program, we had a successful cycle 1 where 15 local grants for a total of $45 million were awarded in the Valley. Cycle 2 is coming up, where we're awarding another $100 million statewide. The call for projects will be in January for cycle 2, with applications due in April. Project announcements will be in August of 2023. We had an application workshop last week, and there will be additional workshops coming up in January through March. We also have our state beautification program. We have 17 state beautification projects for an approximate dollar amount of $26.6 million over 2 years. These projects must be constructed by June 30th of 2023. They must be non-controversial with no right-of-way acquisition, and they must have community support. Approximately $330,000 was allocated to the State Route 99 Madera Block Wall Enhancement Project. And next, I'll turn it over to Brad Cole, our District 6 Landscape Architect, to talk about the project. Brad?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Can you hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I'm Brad Cole. I'm the Caltrans District 6 Landscape Architect. Thank you for allowing us to present to you this evening. This first slide shows some photographs of the proposed planting concepts that we've got planned for the wall. There are a few components to the beautification project. Well, one is planting for aesthetics and graffiti deterrence. Plants are low water use to minimize the impact on our water resources. Plants will be on Caltrans automatic remote irrigation system that basically is part of the rest of the freeway system. And the second part would be the art panels. As you see in this photo, we've got slides of 3 different colors of oleander that kind of have in repeating patterns. And also on the photo on the right is actually a creeping fig that will grow to the wall. It will stick to the wall itself and really deter graffiti. We have a good success with planting vines on the wall for graffiti. You can go to the next slide. So this slide shows, this is basically the plan. If you guys, I know not everybody is used to looking at plans like I am every day, but this plan shows the locations of the oleander planting and then also the vine along the wall. This project proposes to plant vines and oleanders along the sound wall that is located just south of 4th Street, the 4th Street off-ramp on the northbound side of State Route 99. This plan shows locations of shrubs and vines and the locations of the 5 sets of art panels to be placed on the wall. So you can kind of see, as you can see, the little breaks. So we've got the oleander and then the art panel. So and there, in a future slide, you can move to the next slide. So art panels. This is kind of we think this is kind of an innovative approach because the wall is a split face. It was determined that we need to have a smooth surface on the wall to display the art. So the substrate is a high density foam. It's commonly used in the sign making industry. The foam is then wrapped with a printed vinyl image. The vinyl wrap approach was taken so that if the art was damaged, it could be easily replaced. It's also lightweight, and if for some reason, if there was an accident or there's a need to replace the wall, the panels could come off. And also, like I say, if it were hit, it wouldn't cause a very minimal damage, if any, to a vehicle. We've set aside some funding also in the budget to replace the vinyl at a later time. The vinyl, as you can see up here, it's about approximately 5-year lifespan. So we do plan on having additional funds to replace that vinyl wrap, at least one. And that kind of gives us an opportunity to either have a new artist come in and replace the art or replace the art in kind. We do have, like I say, there's 5 sets of 4 panels. These could be one artist. We kind of foresee that one artist would have one set of panels, but we're still in the early phases of determining what that art is. We're working with the Madera Arts Council in the city to do an RFP with artists to get their ideas and give us concepts about what they would propose. So there's potential to have 5 different artists, each one with a collection of 4, or it could be one artist that does every panel. That's something that we can, like I say, to be determined. And then, like I say, we're working with the Arts Council and to develop the art and installation. So this photo shows the kind of the before condition. As you can see, this is a Google Earth image, but this kind of shows where, just like I say, just before the 4th Street off ramp. You can move to the next one. That transition's so dramatic. So this one shows our simulation of the oleander planted along the wall, and you can see right towards the middle is a rendition of what our panel could look like. And like I say, there's 5 of these that repeat. Next slide. And with this one, I'm going to turn this over. I think that's all I had. I'm going to turn it over to Joseph.
Joseph, you're on mute.
Joseph, we can't hear you.
So it's Joe, can you hear us okay? We can't hear you, Joe.
Looks like his mic is not on. It's unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there.
There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know what's, anyway, I'm glad you can hear me. Thank you. Yeah, so basically the devil's in the details, of course. And so we're dealing with a total budget of approximately $100,000. And that consists of the artwork, the material, the admin costs. And so we're trying to work within that constraint. So if you go to the next slide, what we envision is having three agreements or one agreement that addresses all three of the issues presented above. We need to have a cooperative agreement between the city and Caltrans. There will be another agreement between the city and the Arts Council, and then finally a maintenance agreement between the city and Caltrans to do the ongoing maintenance of the project after it's set. We can go to the next slide. Where we had the most discussion was around these three factors of how will an artist be selected, what criteria will be used to select the art, and the role of the city council in the selection process. In your package on the staff report, you'll see that what we were proposing is that a arts committee be set up that will be headed up by the Arts Council, will be established by them, Jim Coker. And that could consist of members from the City Council, the Arts Council, the Arts Authority, MUSD, or even Madera Community College. We're dealing with a very short runway, so I expect this to happen shortly after the new year starts. And
Joe, excuse me, you're cutting in and out a little bit. I'm not too sure if everyone's hearing that or if it's just us here in the council chambers.
It's a little bit difficult to hear.
Yes.
I think I'm having trouble with my microphone. I'm not sure. Let's see here. Can you hear me now or is it muted?
That's better.
No, that's better. Thank you, Joe. So would you mind repeating the tail end of that last one in terms of?
Yeah. So what we envision is this was probably where we had the team had the most discussion around is how do we go through this process of actually selecting an artist and the criteria and the role of the council. What we agreed on as far as the direction that we're going to be heading is that there be a committee set up, which will be formed by Jim Coker from the Arts Council. And that committee will and can consist of members from the City Council, the Arts Council, the Arts Authority, Madera Unified, or even Madera Community College. We have a short runway to get this project completed, so I expect this to happen within the first 2 weeks after the new year. So you'll be hearing from Jim, some of the council members, and if you have any other ideas about this, we're open for discussion. The next slide, please. And so the total project estimate is at $330,000, but our component for the arts component is $100,000, as I mentioned earlier. And next slide. And if there's any questions or comments, we'll gladly entertain those.
Joe, if I may just add something, this is probably best for you to answer. So the city's council role, the council's role would be to serve on the committee, but not the entire council, obviously, but maybe a member to the city council to serve on this very project specific committee. And the final decision for which art is going to go on the wall, that would be up to the city council. Am I correct in saying that?
Correct.
So just to walk the council through, the plan is, if the council's open to it, obviously, is that there would be an art selection committee that would be comprised of different members. Again, the Arts Authority, the Arts Council, the City Council, and potentially Madera Unified School District and the college or whoever else the council would be an appropriate member. We simply choose that as an idea, but it's really up to the council. The council, well, we should have X person on here because they're an art expert. At that point, the Arts Council will go through the RFP process with the various committee members, and then they will make a recommendation to the city council in terms of the art that's going to go on the wall. That's going to come before the city council, and the city council will have ultimate authority in terms of deciding if that's the appropriate art to be selected on there. The construction of the wall itself is going to be done by Caltrans. So council gets to select the art, but it's going to be a recommendation by the arts committee. But a council member can sit on the arts committee. And the purpose of the arts committee is not to have a forever committee, but rather the goal is to establish a committee, but the committee would dissolve at the conclusion of this project, because we don't want to necessarily establish a committee moving forward, because there's other organizations that that are probably more appropriate for that. So hopefully I didn't step on anyone's toes, and hopefully that makes sense, right, Joe? And it looks like you may have a statement, if that's okay, or a comment.
Actually, I just have a question. 3 contracts were referenced, and I was wondering, it seems like they would precede the selection committee doing its work, because they have to pick art that would be part of an artist painting it. So just for clarification.
So part of our discussions centered around how we invoice and get paid. So yeah, we would have to establish at least the co-op agreement between Caltrans and the city initially. We could also, and part of our rationale behind that is because we want to pass through the funds to the Arts Council as a subrecipient. And so we'll head this up.
Thank you. We will now move on to questions from my colleagues. Council Member Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So this may be a question for Caltrans, but on the slides that you presented, Jennifer, you had shrubbery that was the oleanders, and you also mentioned, or you had vines in there. Is that options that the city or the Arts Council has an opportunity to select, or are you set on oleanders?
Yes, thank you, Council Member. I'm going to defer to Brad on that.
Oh, sure.
Landscape, yeah.
Yeah, so we have the plans have been completed, and we did award the contract. So we're going to get starting on this in the next probably mid-January. But yeah, so we pretty much got that set. If there was some ideas that we may be able to do a change order, we might be able to look at something additional. We were looking at the oleander because it is. We found that it's really tough, and it does give it's fairly vigorous and has some color in the summertime. But if there's others, we could possibly entertain another option. We can look to see if that would be if we could get a cost-effective change order. But that's something we can look at. Like I say, things are going to happen very quickly.
Thank you, Brad. I don't know at this point. I was just asking the question because I know oleanders can seem to get pretty big and sometimes become could be a place where folks may want to reside and what have you as they get bigger and whatnot. But I was thinking like vines that are pretty aggressive, the bougainvilleas or some different type of vine that may give the city an appeal alongside that art that's presented in the middle. But I mean, again, I don't know how far you're into this. It looks like you already have the oleanders as a set.
And they are a dwarf variety, so they aren't going to be as large as the typical oleander. I should have said that before.
Okay, good. Yeah, because the oleanders that you have in the medians that divide the freeway sometimes become pretty big, and also alongside the freeway in other areas. And I think this is where folks will find residents when they have that concealment of the shrubs there. Thank you, Brad. Appreciate
Sure.
the question.
Thank you. I have a question. I see in the report that you have the ownership of the project. It would be Caltrans, but the city would be required to maintain it with some of the funding, like short-term available, but the long-term is questionable. How would we know, or when would we know how much funding is available, and how much funding would that be?
I did want to clarify, and it didn't in the presentation, but the landscaping would definitely be maintained by Caltrans. So that's all. It's all kind of part of our typical maintenance along the landscaped freeway section in the city. So the maintenance agreement would be just for the art itself, and we've got some art installations in the city of Fresno that. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the tile mosaics that we have. We've had those for quite a while, and we haven't really seen much need for maintenance. So I wouldn't anticipate that the maintenance portion be a very heavy lift. So I would, like I say, I think that the majority obviously is the landscaping.
And I would actually put some contingency language in the maintenance agreement as well, with maybe a threshold or a ceiling of costs. So that's my thinking. I had the same thoughts.
Thank you. Councilmember Montes?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I just had a question, because I know you mentioned, I think, Brad, this is going to move pretty quickly. So for today, I know this is information, but we would ask for this to come back. It would be appropriate at this time it sounded like there was an ad hoc possibility, but I think we do have a representative on our arts council from the council currently, right? Would it be appropriate to just say that would be the person? And it sounds like we're looking for at least some direction on the makeup of that.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, there's no action language on your agenda, not even direction language. So, but what you're saying, the person that's on that committee already from the council could be one of the persons, and if they need another one,
And we can make
come
that,
back.
so we can make the request for this to come back at council reports. And then that when it does come back, we can make those decisions.
Right.
It could, right. And if you obviously wanted to establish some direction this evening, so then Brad, or so Jim and his team could start reaching out to potential individuals or organizations that could potentially have someone on the committee. For example, we have not approached Madera Unified School District. We have not approached the college. And so we're assuming that they would want to participate. But of course, we wanted to come to council to make sure that we had proper direction before we got too far ahead of our skis. And the council says, hey, hold on, what are you doing? That way we want to be.
No, I think it makes sense to have all the community come together and have a say in it. So I think that's a good idea to have staff at least start reaching out. So when they bring something back, we can have a yay or nay, and we can move quickly to was it Brad's point that they want to move quickly on this.
So I think if council's okay with the approach, and then what we'll do is we'll continue to work with Jim and Brad and the Caltrans team, and then we'll come back on January the 18th, which is our next scheduled meeting, because we're not going to be having the meeting January the 4th. We'll have an action item. But in the meantime, we'll start reaching out to some organizations to see kind their willingness to participate and the timing, because that's the other thing. We're not too sure exactly how much time is going to be involved in terms of the dedication or the time requirements, I should say, for those participating. And so we'll sharpen our pencils a little bit to make sure that we have all that down.
And in the interim, those agreements that we need, is that something that's pretty standard? I don't know, Joe, if that's something that we already kind of have.
Well, we have some pro forma drafts that we've kind of been kicking around, but we should have something fairly quickly. I've been looking at, and we'll have to run those by Hilda, of course.
Go shopping for something different than old vendors. Just kidding.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Councilmember Montes, I wasn't kidding. So, I know, do we still have a beautification committee the city has? And was there any consideration of maybe having someone from that committee be part of this? And Arnoldo, I'm not sure if you may answer that. If not, that's fine.
I think it's probably more appropriate for Joe, but I think that committee may be dormant for some time, but we can always reach out to them.
Mhm.
Direction from council, we'll definitely reach out to them. That's council's direction.
I know this is a workshop, so I'm not sure if we can, but we may be able to put that on the suggested future agenda items. But also, I don't want to just leave on the oleanders. If there is input that you can get from the Arts Council, I would hope that at least you circulate that through them and see what their response is, see if that's the best thing. As people come to Madera, and if we have an opportunity to have feedback on that, that'd be great. At least to have those folks get involved.
Okay. Can Joe will follow up with Brad, and it looks like Brad is nodding online. So I'm pretty sure that Brad got the message. Something other than oleanders would be preferable.
At the end of the day, if that's the deal, then we go with oleanders, no problem.
And I'd like to make a recommendation on, I know the community-based organization Dulce Upfront, they've been working with youth, with murals in downtown Madera, and also with small business owners. So they would be somebody good to reach out to make sure that we're including our youth voices.
Okay. And that's Dulce Upfront?
Yes.
Okay. And maybe Joe can get a contact come from you later, Mayor Pro Tem, if that's appropriate.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
So, and just to recap, it sounds like conceptually the council's okay with us approaching can the Arts Council, who's on the call right now, the Arts Authority, who Councilmember Vega sits on representing the city as the city council representative. We'll reach out to the college, Madera Unified School District. And I feel like I'm missing one. And for some reason, my main's going blank. We'll reach out to Dulce Upfront.
And I guess the beautification committee as well.
And thank you very much. Kind of sounds like a plan. And then at the next meeting, we'll bring some action items. And in the meantime, Jim and his team, as well as Joe, Jennifer, and Brad, will get together to start crafting language for a potential RFP to identify both an artist and the art itself.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We will now move on to the consent calendar. Matters listed under the consent calendar.
Excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm not sure if it'd be appropriate during a workshop. I'll defer to you, but do we typically accept public comment on a public workshop? We do. Okay.
Okay.
And so we may want to ask if there's any public comment, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, I will open it up for public comment on this item. Do we have any public comment?
It does not look like we have anyone in the audience. There are no emails. And Mark, I'll defer to you.
There's no one on Zoom right now.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, we will now move on to the consent calendar. Matters listed under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion and one vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, a member of the public or a member of the council may request an item be removed from the consent calendar, and it will be considered separately. Do I have a motion on the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay. Oh, okay.
If you can perhaps ask your peers if anybody wants to pull anything from the council members, and then ask members of the public if there's anybody there. And if there's none, then you can ask for a motion.
Okay. Do I have an interest in removing anything from the consent calendar? No. We will now open it up to public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on this?
Mayor Pro Tem, it does not look like anyone in the audience is here to speak, and I do not have any written comments. Mark?
And no one on Zoom.
Thank you, Mark.
And I will now close it. And I will accept a motion on the consent calendar.
Motion to approve the consent calendar as follows.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Evans, seconded by Councilmember Villegas. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. The next item on the agenda is we have public hearings.
Mayor Pro Tem, we don't have any public hearings this evening.
Okay. We don't have any public hearings, so the next item is petitions, bids, resolutions, ordinances, and agreements. Item D1 is on the wastewater pathogen monitoring agreement with Verily Life Sciences.
Correct. Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. This evening, we have Jamie Hickman, our interim public works director, and along with him, we have Dr. Paul from Madera County. And Jamie, are you going to be starting off this presentation?
Yeah, that'll be.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. The city is recommending council to adopt the resolution approving a materials transfer agreement with Verily Life Sciences, LLC, to analyze wastewater samples at the city's wastewater treatment plant in support of public health monitoring. The biggest benefit from having Verily analyze the wastewater samples from the wastewater treatment plant is that it provides information on the presence of pathogens such as SARS, COVID-19, monkeypox, influenza, and RSV, which will help make it easier for the city, county, and state to track these pathogens. Samples will help government officials at all levels to make evidence-based decisions that can help control their spread. The city will be reimbursed by Verily at a rate of $150 to $200 per sample for staff's time, which would be minimal. This will result in no cost to ratepayers, nor will it affect the current operations of the wastewater treatment plant. Verily will make all sample results available to the public. This agreement will commence upon the effective date and continue until January 31st, 2024, and will then automatically renew month to month until December 31st, 2026. The agreement can be ended anytime within 7 days written notice for material breach and 14 days written notice for any reason. With that being said, we have Dr. Simon Paul, Public Health Officer for the County of Madera, who will present on the benefits of this proposed agreement.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much. So Mayor Pro Tem and council members, thank you also for the opportunity to present. The Public Works Department and especially the treatment facility staff did an amazing job figuring out the how and working with Verily to do that. So I'm going to quickly go over the why. Let me share my screen. Can you see my slides okay?
Yes, we can see them.
Great. So as far as the why, there's two things. Every presentation, we're always asked at the Public Health Department about any infectious disease, whether it's COVID, flu, monkeypox, West Nile, Ebola. The two things people want to know is this illness present in our area? And are the numbers of cases increasing or decreasing? And those sound like simple things to know, but it's actually quite complicated. To actually know the level of a disease in the community, you have to test thousands of people, including many asymptomatic people. And with COVID, as you know, we did pretty well with this, at least in the beginning. Once testing became available, most people with mild to moderate symptoms went to get tested because they wanted to find out. The testing was mandated to be reported and testing became widely available. So for a while, we had really pretty good data on how many cases of COVID were in the community, whether they're increasing or decreasing. We didn't know about all the asymptomatic people, but we had a pretty good idea of what was going on. And as you know, that's starting to fall apart now because everybody's doing home testing. That's not reportable. People who are less symptomatic tend not to test. Maybe they had COVID before. They don't want to find out. So now that data is starting to get a lot worse. But that's with COVID that we had good testing and it's reportable. For other illnesses, it's actually, we use a lot of indirect data. For example, people have heard RSV is a problem. How much RSV is out in the community? Well, we don't really know. It's not reportable. What we look at instead of are things like, well, of people who are ill, with a respiratory illness who get tested, what percent of them test positive for RSV, and that seems to be increasing. Or for people who are hospitalized, they get tested for everything. So for hospitalized people, we know RSV is going up, so it's probably going up in the community as well. And then there's other indirect stuff that we use, like, well, we know how many, because they're billed as influenza-like illness visits, we know how many clinic and urgent care visits there are for respiratory illnesses. And if those are going up and RSV is testing a lot in the hospital, probably a lot of that's RSV. There's even more indirect things, like there's web-based thermometers, and you can tell how many people are taking their temperatures and how many fevers are in the community. So you can see it's complicated knowing how much of a disease is in the community and whether it's spreading. The special problem with new diseases is physicians may not even be testing for it initially, and testing may not be widely available. For things like monkeypox, there's a long ramp up where you train community physicians to look out for this disease and to test for it. So it's very hard to know when something's newly appearing. So why are these numbers important? Yeah, it's nice to know, but it's also very important for allocating resources. For example, with COVID, right now, hospital capacity in the San Joaquin Valley is at 120%. It's sort of reaching the critical level. It's extremely important for us for planning to know if cases are going to continue to increase or not. And again, as I mentioned, most people are doing home tests. We don't know how good the outpatient data is. So what data do we have? Here's the data we kind of look at from the state. This over here, the blue bars, those are reported COVID tests. Whoppingly underestimates it because it doesn't include any home tests. And you can see they're kind of going up, maybe at leveling off. From that, they do modeling, and you can see the models bounce around all over the place. They average it. But when this number gets down to the dashed line, we think things are leveling off. And from that, here's cases, hospitalizations, and ICU patients. They're bad now. They'll probably maybe go up a little bit and level off. So that's all very helpful and important. But one thing that's incredibly helpful also is Fresno City actually does wastewater monitoring. Here's the area that this water treatment plant covers, and here's their data. And you can see since about December 1st, COVID data, the wastewater data, the numbers are plummeting. So it's coming down a lot. That's not the only data point we need, but that is incredibly reassuring for predicting where things are going to be going. So you can see with COVID, this data is a very useful additional data point. In the future going forward, okay, so we already know it's helpful for COVID. We can see that we're using it already. As the methodology gets improved, wastewater sampling is likely to be increasingly important, both for monitoring things we know are present already in the community, things like RSV, flu, or West Nile virus. Those tests aren't developed yet, but they're being developed. It's incredibly important for the arrival of new pathogens. For example, we're monitoring, returning travelers from Uganda. And when Mpox showed up, you may not realize it, but initially vaccines were only allocated to counties that had cases. And maybe there's no cases in Madera, or maybe there's cases, but people aren't presenting for treatment, aren't getting tested because we don't have a lot of physicians and a lot of people who are aware of the testing. So we're not getting any vaccine because there's no cases. But if we were able to demonstrate in the wastewater, hey, there's cases showing up in Madera, we would then get vaccines or whatever the resources are for the infection to address it. So it's very important for the arrival of new pathogens. And there's other issues like bioterrorism monitoring for pathogens that it could also be useful for sort of emergency preparedness. But in conclusion, wastewater monitoring for infectious diseases, it's a new technology and it's extremely promising. The Verily contract will allow us, the city of Madera, to really be at the cutting edge implementing this technology and working out the details with them now. Whatever methodology we're developing now with the treatment plant will be useful in the future to quickly ramp up testing for any other diseases. And really the bottom line is like what Mr. Hickman said, this improves our ability to monitor for infectious disease threats, really to protect the health of the Madera City residents. So that's my summary quickly of the why. I'm happy to answer any questions, whether it's about the details of the testing or anything else that people have questions about. And I will stop sharing my screen if I can figure out how.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. We have a question from Councilmember Montes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Member. Just curiosity. So by the time it's detectable in wastewater treatment plant samples, do we know how long it's been in the community, or can we make a guess, I guess, by parts per million or something?
It's probably going to depend on the infection. How much of it presents in the wastewater will depend on the sensitivity, right? Like it maybe some infections, they don't end up in the sewage very much, and we'd have to have 100 cases before we would know. But if you start monitoring for it when there's 0 and you see it going up, that's going to give you the sense of the timeline. You can extrapolate back, right? So if you didn't catch it when it was 0 and it went from 100 to 1,000, you draw a line back through it and you say, oh, it probably showed up about a week and a half ago. So there's different methodologies. It's really going to depend on the specific pathogen. And again, how they standardize this, what they compare it to. There's how much COVID versus how much sewage, flow, other DNA samples that they can compare it to. So that's really being developed and will depend on the infection.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Dr. Paula, I have a question in regards to the data that you collect. I know that you mentioned some of the pathogens there, but any of that data, I mean, as far as privacy goes, say, for example, the region of Madera, you start seeing a certain flux of different pathogens that potentially can, I hate to say that, indirectly affect folks with their healthcare. Is that something that potentially can happen when we share data to organizations that may have impact in our community?
I may not be getting all the details that you're asking about, but the biggest concern from us is always privacy. And they're actually not sampling in areas where the wastewater is fewer than 50,000 people. So there's really no way to, but the first concern is identify people specifically. Like, you know, we do specific areas of the county for COVID, and that was initially so that we wouldn't be announcing COVID cases in areas small enough where people could think they could identify it. So individual privacy, I don't think is an issue. Then there's just an issue of, do we want people to know this disease is in this area? And we don't have to agree to monitor for any diseases that we don't want to, right? Initially, they'll only be testing for COVID. Mpox is the next one that's also widely being picked up in California, but those cases are going down, so that monitoring may stop. So the city would always have the option of, do we want to monitor for this disease or not? And I think the biggest reason for it is whatever illness you can think of, we always need resources to address it, right? Whether it's HIV or STDs or COVID, and we need vaccination or we need treatment. This helps people figure out what resources are needed where. So we can pick the diseases that we want to test for. And the real benefit to it is it helps us get the resources that we need.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Paul. No, I appreciate that. No, I'm certainly in favor of monitoring for all these pathogens. My only concern is that when you extrapolate data and you know, organizations can certainly use it into some, I don't know how you share that data. I mean, obviously you mentioned it's for public health. My concern is if, you know, there's a big pathogen or someone, you know, somehow it has a disparate impact on folks if for some reason that pathogen is something that healthcare providers wouldn't want to address because of the illness and what have you. That was my only concern is, you know, how data is extrapolated, not necessarily with public health departments, more so of where it went.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I'm thinking through the scenario, but like if Ebola showed up in Madera before anywhere else, in the short run, that might be damaging, just like when, you know, HIV showed up in Haiti, it was very damaging to their tourism economy. On the other hand, it's going to be figured out fairly soon thereafter, and it's better to be ahead of things than behind them, I think is the way I would think through that. Again, I'm not sure I'm thinking through the same scenarios you are, but you know, if it makes people sick, cases are going to show up, and it's better to know the extent of the problem as soon as possible to really get ahead of things like that and be able to address them well and protect providers, right? Providers need to know that, you know, they need to take it seriously, the PPE or whatever's required for these infections. And that's very hard to do if you don't think the case is anywhere in the state or the county. So those kind of early warnings are helpful for protecting providers, for getting patients treated correctly. And again, kind of staying ahead of the problem. But also, like I said, this contract, it's only going to monitor for diseases that the city agrees to have them monitored for.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. I appreciate you answering that question.
We have a question from Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Dr. Paul, and so you're saying the city is going to test for what the city wants or feels needs to be tested. Who decides that?
Oh, right now the testing is only for COVID. That's the only test that we're going to be doing through Verily. But the issue is we're figuring out how to do it. Like there's been a lot of back and forth with Verily. Where in the treatment plant do we sample? What kind of samples do we collect? How do we collect them and store them? So we're figuring all of that out with COVID, and it'll be very useful for COVID. And then in the future, as other tests become available, Mpox would be the next most likely one, except those cases are disappearing. If it turns out that there's a test available for whatever, then we can contract with Verily to please also test for this or not. So right now the contract, I believe, is specific for COVID, but it gives us the opportunity in the future to test for other things.
Okay. And so that, I think you kind of answered the other question I have, is if when we do testing, are we going to do it at different times of the day and not just always like at noon on every first Tuesday of the month? Are we going to like mix that up every once in a while?
Yeah, it's 3 times a week. And where we're sampling represents more than like the last hour or two. It's sort of a part of the sewage treatment of the treatment facility where things turn over days, not over hours. So a sample layer represents kind of what's been going on for the last day or so. And we're doing it every 3 days, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I think is the days they picked.
Okay. And I don't know who can answer this, is either it's Jamie, you, or our city manager. I know our residents have asked for this, and COVID is now in the decline compared to where we were 3 years ago. And so I'm going to get questions as a council member. How come it's happening now and it didn't happen when we were at the spike of COVID?
Yeah, I think it's just a question. Well, 2 things. One is initially it's like when we had really good testing for COVID, it actually wasn't that helpful. Like when this started being rolled out, they were like, this gives you, 24 hours before the cases go up. You can see it go up in the wastewater, because in those days we had everybody doing PCR tests and rapid turnaround times. So yeah, it gave you a couple of days advance notice, but it wasn't like it is now where we have very much worse testing data for COVID. And it's nothing at all like it was like for Mpox when there was barely testing available, like in the early days of COVID. So when it rolled out, it was still being standardized and we still had very good testing data. So initially, it wasn't actually adding a whole lot to what we knew about what was going on. The other thing that was interesting about COVID is, as far as did we need an early warning, a couple of days notice is very nice, but COVID almost always spread from the coastal larger counties. If it spiked there, then a couple of weeks later, it would spike here. So for me, knowing what was going to happen here, what was most useful was actually looking what was happening on the coast, LA, San Francisco, because then sure enough, and that's like the hospital data that I showed you now. The other thing we know is RSV and flu and COVID is starting to go down in San Francisco and LA and the large coastal counties. It's plateauing here. And my guess is it's going down there. Soon it'll start to go down here because of the way COVID spread. We kind of got a lead from what was going on elsewhere. So there are a few reasons why I don't think it was as high a priority then. Mpox, it would have been very helpful to have had it. And they developed it for Mpox as it was sort of appearing. So there were a lot of cases before they had it actually up and running for Mpox.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gallegos. Councilwoman Evans has a question.
Yes. So in the event, once you test and you see that the influx is rising, will there be notification sent out immediately or will it be delayed? Or how will that be publicized?
It's posted publicly. Like the slide I showed from Fresno County, that's posted every 3 days or something like that. And it's publicly available. So if people want, just like you can see COVID case numbers for the state, you can see the wastewater data for the state.
Okay, so in the event, even though I know they're saying that the COVID is going down, in the event that it should start to rise again, so we would immediately be able to see it as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. We have a question from Councilman Montes.
My last question, Mayor President, I promise. So I know in the past, one of the other issues that we had with, not that we had, but that was expressed to us was that it was a large cost. And so this agreement is essentially just for Verily to use our wastewater treatment plant for sample gathering. So it's actually cost neutral to us, correct?
Correct. Actually, Verily is going to be paying the city for every sample. So as opposed to a year or two ago where we would be paying in this, under this contract, Verily is going to compensate the city between $150 and $200 per sample. Can we believe that we can do everything that's being asked for us for less than that? Okay. And so those funds would be then placed in the wastewater fund. So the ratepayer is not going to experience any increase. I'm not going to say decrease either because the funds are, quite frankly, they're nominal. But the goal here, again, we're going back a year or two, we would be paying under this scenario where they're going to be paying us.
Mhm.
All right, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I actually do have a question myself. I know that you said that this information is going to become available to the public. I think that's great. The more information we have, the better. Do you have capability to have this information sent out to in Spanish? And I know that for myself, sometimes I get these notices and I find myself like Googling. So the most layman terms possible.
Yeah, that's an important question. Any alerts or advisories that we put out, obviously we always translate them into both languages. If they post it on their dashboard, I don't know if they actually have that right now in Spanish or English. Like I got off the Fresno, that's the CDPH dashboard. I don't know if those dashboards are in English and Spanish. I can check. But the separate thing that we do is we have our own dashboard, as you know, for COVID. And increasingly, we're working on importing some of the state data into that dashboard. And so our own presentation of the data we have control of and can make sure it's done both in Spanish and English.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. I see no more questions here. I'm sorry. Well, there's no additional. Is there any additional questions from my colleagues? Let's see, no more questions. I will now open this up to public comment.
I don't see anyone in the audience wishing to speak, and I do not have any written comments. Mark?
And there's no one on Zoom.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues.
Move to approve item D1 as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Council Member Montes and seconded by Councilwoman Gallegos. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Those opposed say no.
No.
We have ayes from 5 of us, and 1 no from Council Member Rodriguez. I will now move on to item D2, amendment to an agreement with Baez and Patel Inc. regarding the Lloyd Cook Water Tower. This presentation is going to be made by Steve Betancourt.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Madera City Council. My name is Steve Betancourt. I'm the Senior Civil and Project Manager on the Lloyd Cook Water Tower project. Let me share my screen. You see that okay?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. I'm here to present an amendment to an agreement with Baez and Patel Incorporated. This is regarding the Lloyd Cook Water Tower. They're structural and civil engineers. Let me give a little background. Approximately a year ago, the Lloyd Cook Tower holds 1 million gallons of water and is approximately 134 feet high. It's located on D Street. It's the only elevated operational water tank that's in use in the city. Last year, the city issued a request for proposals to evaluate the tower for structural code and the interior and exterior coatings. We received 2 responses, and Baez and Patel were selected. Contract was for approximately $105,000. They did a field investigation. What they found is that the exterior and interior needed to be recoated and repainted. The tower has some minor corrosion. There is some anchor bolts that are overstressed and in the connections to the concrete. And the column base plate and anchor bolts require retrofitting. And the tower overall needs to be upgraded to meet current codes. Horizontal tie rods, they also found that horizontal tie rods meant height connecting the outer columns to the center column simply needed to be replaced. The Madera iconic logo is degrading along with the paint and needs to be repainted. And the tower is not considered unsafe, which is very important, but does need periodic upgrades. As a follow-up, staff requested that the consulting firm submit a bid to engineer plans, specifications, and provide estimates so that we could bid for construction. We received a proposal for $119,249.37. Proposal is broken down into two parts. Bid package one would be to recoat the interior of the water tank. And this is because Public Works is replacing the cathodic system on the interior of the tank in early 2023. This recoating will need to be done prior to the replacement of this system. Bid package two would include upgrades to the foundation systems that we just mentioned and a portion of the structural steel bracing. It would also include repainting the exterior of the tank. All of this exterior work will need to be completed after the interior is recoated and the cathodic system is replaced. The exterior painting will cover the Madera sign and iconic logo. We are reviewing options for the logo and the Madera sign after the exterior is painted. The estimated cost, the report notes that the improvements, both bid packages, are estimated to be approximately $1.5 million. Funding for the design and construction of the project is included in the fiscal year 22-23 capital projects budget under city projects W32 and W34. It is our recommendation that the council adopt a resolution approving amendment number 1 to the consultant services agreement with Baez and Patel in the amount of $119,249.37. If anybody from council has any questions, I'll be happy to answer what I can.
Thank you, Steve. We have a question from Councilmember Villegas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have a question for you, Steve. This is good. This should be the total cost, or you expecting to have more? Should be that total.
The estimated cost for repairs is estimated to be $1.5 million.
Yeah, but that should be the whole total. That's my question.
Including the engineering, is that the question? The engineering is, no, excuse me.
It's more, right? There's more cost than this. That's what I want to know. Is the whole total, or is going to be more? And
Steve, if you'd like to, I can try to jump in.
Okay.
So let me go back a little bit. So the city council a year ago approved a contract for roughly $105,000. That's been paid for. The request this evening is to authorize an amendment to the original contract of 105 for an additional 119,000. We would then take the study if council approves it, and that study is going to identify the specifications. Those specifications are going to be put out for a request for proposal for bids. The engineer, the initial estimate that we have right now is that the cost to do the work is 1.5 million. So it would be 1.5 million plus the $120,000 of this evening, plus the 105,000 that we've spent. So total the project would be, I can't do math in my head. I have 1.7.
1.75 million.
Yeah, so thank you, 1.75 million. Now, obviously the 1.5 million is an estimate. Once we go out to bid, those bids will come back to council for ultimate action. Obviously, it would be amazing if the bids would come in lower because the ratepayer would save money. We're hoping that the bids aren't higher, but that's what the bidding process is for. So roughly our estimates right now are 1.7. But then it's pretty difficult to speculate because we don't know what the economy is going to be like when we go out to bid. And hopefully that answered your question, council member. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, city manager.
Thank you.
Yeah, that will answer my question. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, I will now open this for public comment, this item for public comment.
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't see anyone in the audience that is here to speak on this item. I do not have any written comments. Mark?
And there's no one on Zoom.
Thank you. I will now close public comment for this item, and I will ask for a motion from my colleagues.
I so move to approve D2 as presented.
Second.
Okay. Motion presented by Councilwoman Gallegos and seconded by Councilmember Villegas.
The motion was by Councilman Montes, second. No, it was by.
Yeah, it was by her.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. We will now move on to item D3, improvement agreement amendment number 1 for the Pecan Square subdivision, track number 20-S-02, allowing reimbursement for park improvements. And this is presented by Randy Bell.
Good evening, Council. Let me share my screen here. Okay, the item that we're here to discuss this evening is an amendment to the improvement agreement allowing for park improvements within the Pecan Square subdivision. Some background on this is D.R. Horton is the developer, and they initiated the design of park improvements at the new subdivision. Subsequent to the completion of its design, it was determined that staff did not adhere to appropriate standards during the entitlement process on a number of subdivisions, including this one. D.R. Horton was unintentionally given the understanding that park construction was required. Typically, the Planning Commission would require actions or improvements as a result of the approval of the project, but that did not occur. Without an amendment, construction of the park cannot commence. This is the location of the park. It's at near the southwest corner of Pecan and Madera, and the red highlighted area is the location of the park. The typical process for maps is an entitlement process. Tentative subdivision map is approved by the Planning Commission, and that map usually contains conditions of approval. Park improvements would usually be noted within those conditions of approval. The final map approval is by a City Council, and if contained in the conditions of approval and eligible for reimbursement, the improvement agreement would include a provision for reimbursement. D.R. Horton designed the park at the behest of city staff, regardless of the commission and council records. This is established through conversations with staff, emails discussing plan reviews of the park and park amenities. And based on staff review, D.R. Horton could reasonably be assumed to have the understanding construction of the park was indeed part of the subdivision's approval. While D.R. Horton has not told potential buyers that would be a completed park, they have indicated they planned to do so. D.R. Horton has asked for permission to construct the park in accordance with the city's ordinance amendment, establish a method for coordinated acquisition and development of city park facilities. Staff's recommendation for this item is to request that language in the attached resolution be amended as follows. Reference to tentative subdivision map TSM 2018-04 should be changed to TSM 2019-03, and reference to Rancho Santa Fe should be changed to Pecan Square. Additionally, we recommend adopting the amended resolution approving Amendment 1 to the improvement agreement authorizing construction of park improvements within the Pecan Square subdivision and reimbursement for park improvements proposed to be constructed by the subdivider. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from my colleagues? No. I will now move to public comment on this item. Do we have any comments from the public?
Mayor Pro Tem, I do not see anyone in the audience wishing to speak this evening. I do not have any written comments. Mark?
And there's no one on Zoom.
Thank you. I will now take a motion from my colleagues.
Move to approve my item D3.
Second.
Motion to approve item D3 by Councilmember Rodriguez and seconded by Councilmember Villegas. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I will now move on to item D4, purchase of new body worn cameras for the police department. And this item is presented by Lieutenant Arnold.
Yeah. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. We're before you tonight to request an information on body worn cameras. As you know, they're imperative to public safety and police work. We're fully outfitted with in-car cameras and body cameras for all of our employees. However, the body cameras themselves are 10 years old, and they've reached their end of life. And thanks to Mark and Ari and IT, they've been able to duct tape and glue them together, and we've been able to use them. But we're here tonight to give you some information on the direction that we wish to go with purchasing new body cameras. I'd like to thank our city attorney and Wendy Silva for helping us in this process. So I tasked Lieutenant Arnold with researching this endeavor. And one of the options was, do we tear everything down and start over? Or do we get the new advanced version of the system that we already have with the infrastructure that we already have? What's more cost effective? So tonight he'll go over what that is and what the decision was, and we'll present it to you. So with all the hard work that he has done, it's only fitting that he presents his work to you. So with that, Lieutenant Josiah Arnold.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Yes. So like the chief said, our body worn camera system is getting a little old. We bought it in 2016, but it wasn't brand new when we bought it, in as much as the technology or that model of camera was not brand new. And, you know, like if you've ever bought a TV before, imagine if you bought, imagine if you bought a TV in 2016 and you wanted to replace it now with a 2016 model. You couldn't. That's not how electronics work. Their shelf life is very short. So since 2016, a lot of new camera technology has come out. That's to our benefit. And we'll talk about some of the things that you know, the newer cameras that we want to buy have. But they also no longer make the older camera. They don't make the little parts for the older camera. So like Chief says, you know, Ari gets a lot of credit for keeping this thing up and running as long as he has. But just this year, I think we've gotten to the point where you can't go on Craigslist, which we did for a while. You can't go on Craigslist and buy old used body worn cameras of this model anymore. And so, you know, we had planned to push this out a little longer, but unfortunately it's time to replace them. Our goal is for everybody from the animal control officers, code enforcement, the police officers, even our supervisors, to all wear body worn cameras. And we were at that point for a while, but as these have broken down, we've had to pull them back from code enforcement, for instance, and from some of our detectives in order to ensure that our patrol staff still has body worn cameras. And in fact, they don't all have body worn cameras. I think most of our uniform staff does, but sometimes like the sergeant will have to give theirs up in order to make sure that his guys running to 911 calls still have their camera. So along with former President Obama's 21st century policing initiatives, one of the big things the Department of Justice said was that body worn cameras are one law enforcement strategy aimed at improving public safety, reducing crime, and improving public trust between police and the citizens they serve. This is like very rare for all branches of government to agree on something, but they all agree on this. Police officers should wear body worn cameras. It makes everybody safer, and it enables a far higher degree of transparency. So, and as you all know, we recently had an officer involved shooting. I don't think I'm going to shock the chief by saying this, but Chief and I are technologically illiterate. That night, in the middle of the night, the chief and I were trying to figure out how to get the data from that officer's camera downloaded so we could turn it over to the criminal investigating agency, but also so that we could review the shooting, so that we could see with our own eyes what happened. And because of the degradation of our system, a lot of our docking stations don't work. I'm sure Officer Powell knows this far better than the chief and I, but like, you should be able to just take the camera and stick it in the dock. They've got these little metal pins that line up, and the data should should come out of it. That wasn't happening for us. So you can imagine our frustration and anger that night. It took hours for us, and finally Ari really having to step in from home to be able to extract that data. The new system doesn't have that problem. It all uploads wirelessly as soon as the camera comes within, a fairly short distance of the police department. Doesn't even have to come through the doors. So again, we anticipated replacing the cameras next fiscal year, but we can't wait that long. If we wait that long at this point, our officers will be working without cameras on the street. I cannot tell you the number of complaints we've been able to clear by simply showing the citizen, this very objective, third-party view of what happened during the call for service. So as I said, the new cameras have wireless transfer. They also have higher video resolution. Just like your cell phone, imagine the difference in your cell phone now from your cell phone in 2016. They're much better. They have removable batteries, which is a big deal because in the higher capacity batteries, the batteries on our current cameras don't last an entire shift. So it's really crummy that like if you're on day shift, the end of day shift is oftentimes the busiest part of day shift. Well, at the busiest part of day shift, all our cameras are running out of batteries. And the officers have to hopefully, find one they can swap out with that's charging. That becomes less and less realistic as our number of cameras reduce. In this case, the battery probably lasts all day. If it doesn't, you can just swap out batteries and keep on working. They're much more durable. One of the problems we have right now is that the cameras, not only do the cameras themselves break, but also the mounting system is not perfect. So a lot of times when our officers are in, pretty dynamic use of force type incidents, the cameras will break off of where they mount on the officer's vest or on their uniform. That's always going to be a challenge with these cameras because the question is, do you want the mount to break or the whole uniform to rip off? Mostly we don't want that to happen. But this does go a long way toward improving the mounting and improved microphone. The microphones are much better on the newer cameras than they were on the older cameras. And as you could guess, that's pretty important for capturing comments made, by the people that we're interacting with and comments made by ourselves. So we'll talk about some of the alternatives briefly, but we decided early on that we wanted to stay with Motorola. We're a Motorola agency. A lot of our technology is Motorola products. We benefit from having more Motorola products. And we looked at, there's some bid lists out there that we could use, but instead we negotiated directly with Motorola and we're able to save some money, get it down to $108,000. And so this is to upgrade the body worn camera system itself. It works seamlessly with our in-car camera system. And one of the problems with our alternative vendors is that we would also have to upgrade our in-car camera system. Not something we wanted to do. There are a couple of terms and conditions we wanted to talk about. We opted not to do more extensive warranty. So these are only coming with 90-day warranties. The problem was, I think the more extensive warranty costs something like $20,000 a year. Well, we know how often these things break because they do. Even a new one's going to break sometimes. But if we replaced, I can't see us replacing 10 a year. But even at that, they cost about $1,000 each. That's $10,000. It's a lot cheaper than the more extensive warranty. So there's a decision we made early on to just go with the standard manufacturer's warranty. And then also, and Hilda could probably speak better on this than me, but in the terms and conditions, legal battles would take place in Illinois, where the company is based out of in their U.S. market. There are terms and allowances made for negotiating things and keeping them out of court. But if we ever had to go to court and sue Motorola, which I certainly would not want to do, we would be taking a road trip to Illinois to get that done. We're a Motorola agency. Our dispatch equipment's Motorola. We work quite a bit with this company, and it's not something that we're anticipating, but we did want to make council aware. So we talked about the alternative vendors. We're asking for $108,000, or we're building that into our budget. The other ones were around $400,000. They did not provide more functionality. One of them said $400,000, and we said no. And they're like, all right, how about $100,000? We're like, well, that's kind of weird. That's a big jump. But also, they were not compatible with our existing framework. So yeah, it would cost roughly the same amount for the body cameras, but then we would have to go refit all of the cars. And I, again, technology illiterate, but also the systems used to transmit that data from the cars into our department. So again, the cost would go up significantly. So we're asking today for the council to adopt a couple of resolutions. One, approving the Motorola Master Customer Agreement, online terms, acknowledgement, and notice to proceed for the purchase of 48 new Motorola WatchGuard. WatchGuard is owned by Motorola. Body-worn cameras and related equipment and software in the amount of $108,000, $108,934.50. We're also asking the council to adopt a resolution approving a budget amendment to the fiscal year 2022-2023 operating budget to appropriate Measure K funds for the purchase of body-worn cameras.
Thank you. I will now take questions from my colleagues. Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Mejia. Lieutenant Arnold, just one real question. 48 new ones, is that all that we need? If we have 70 sworn on, including code enforcement and all of that, is 48 going to be enough?
That's a great question. Obviously, we kicked that number around quite a bit, but so the majority of our staff is your uniform staff, but not all the, a lot of those people they're not all working at the same time. And so like the day shift officers, it's actually the smallest amount of staff that we need more cameras for, because those day shift officers would turn over to the night shift and then the weekday to the weekends. So 48 gives you a camera on every single working body in the city at any given time.
So when day shift goes off, they're charged enough for night shift to pick up on?
That's what, there's always batteries on the chargers. And that's why we're buying the 24 additional batteries.
Okay.
So a good question. Again, some didn't arrive at that number lightly, but that will give us a camera on every officer plus some extras.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Montes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Mejia. I just had a question regarding security of the cameras. Is that something that we may have an increased cost, or we're going to have our IT kind of look into? Because for the wireless uploading, so I know we hear horror stories of baby monitor people hacking into them. Obviously, this is better technology than a baby monitor, but is that something that we're looking at, or any considerations made towards that end?
It is an encrypted system, and it's new for us, but it's not new out there. There's a lot of police agencies that use the system already and haven't had issues with it. But good question, something that we were concerned about, because again, people that aren't really technologically advanced, we don't know how, I don't know how the remote control works, but yeah, right. Seems to be a good system. Yeah.
Okay.
And it will. So speaking of the cloud, it will still save onto a permanent, true physical server within our agency.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Evans.
So once the officer places the camera on him, will it automatically go on, or does he have to turn it on? And does he also have the option of turning it off, or will it remain on until he puts it back into the holster and the next officer picks it up?
So it's always recording on a loop, and that loop is pretty long. So like if I'm wearing a camera right now and I go home and in the morning, you're like, hey, I don't like the way that officer was talking to me. Even if I didn't turn the camera on, the chief could still come in and pull that data out of the camera. Now, they also can manually activate the camera, which is what we prefer, because it's much easier to go back and watch what's on the camera, and it saves for a lot longer. Other things trigger the camera coming on as well. And that's why we want a system that works seamlessly with what's in our cars. So when the officer turns on their lights in their car, the in-car camera pops on. That also pops on their body-worn camera. So when they're doing a traffic stop, whether they want to or not, everything's turned on. If they, drive over a certain speed, things like that will trigger the camera.
So the officer doesn't have the option of turning it off and on in the midst of a stop or whatever.
So again, they can typically what happens is, like, let's say you call the police and they show up to your house and take a report, they'll turn the camera on when they get out of their car. Because in that case, they didn't turn their lights on to go to your house and take that report. And then usually after the call, they would turn the camera off. But when I say off and on, again, it's always recording. That's just capturing it in a more easy way. The data is still being captured 24/7, whether the officer activates the camera or not.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, also, we have policy that mandates the officer on certain instances must turn the camera on. But one of the reasons we went with the WatchGuard system was for that. Whether they turn it on or off, it still is recording, capturing the data. And we can go back, even if they don't turn it on at all, which would be a violation of policy, and they would be disciplined for that. However, we can go back and capture all of that. So that's why we went with the Motorola system or WatchGuard, because of that. So there's safeguards in this. So whether they turn it on or off is irrelevant.
Thank you very much.
And our officers, like, I would not want to be a police officer on the street going to calls for service without a body worn camera turned on. The adherence or buy-in to the program is pretty high. Everybody understands the value of it. I think any officer that's worked any amount of time has had the experience of someone calling and filing a complaint and being able to pull up a video and say, like, whoa, hey, I didn't say that. Here's what happened. In an objective, again, third-party view. I mean, it's priceless.
Very good. Thank you.
We have a question from Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Lieutenant Arnold, just one question. You mentioned 48 cameras. Now, the cameras are being activated are only for officers that are out in the field, correct?
So the cameras are for officers out in the field, again, code enforcement, our detectives, special investigations unit, and our animal control division. So like a dispatcher wouldn't wear one, or someone working the front desk, although there are cameras in our lobby, someone working the front desk wouldn't wear one. We probably won't put one on the chief, but yeah, it's people that are working in the public with the public.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez. What is the life expectancy for the cameras?
The estimated life expectancy for the cameras is around 6 years. Again, we got a lot more out of that we're getting around that from our current cameras. We hope for more than that, but at a 10-a-year replacement program, it's well within our budget to maintain, these cameras for the life of their program. At some point, Motorola will get, a better model that I'm sure that we'll want, and will better serve our transparency purposes with the public. But we expect 6 years. They predict 6 years.
Thank you. I see no more questions, so I will now open this item up for public comment.
Mayor Pro Tem, I do not see anyone in the audience wishing to speak, and I do not have any written comments. Mark?
And there's no one on Zoom.
Thank you for the presentation. I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues.
I so move to approve D4 as presented.
Second.
Motion presented by Councilwoman Gallegos, seconded by Councilmember Villegas. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will now move on to item D5, a budget amendment to transfer from fund balance and appropriate $200,000 for the purchase of new equipment for the new Type 1 fire engine. And this presentation is by Chief Matt Watson.
Shared the wrong screen.
No, you're good on Zoom, but
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Chief Matt Watson here in front of you tonight for a budget amendment to purchase some equipment. That'll include the transfer of $200,000 for fire equipment for the new Type 1 engine. As Council will recall, November 1st, 2021, Council authorized the purchase of a new Type 1 fire engine for $751,000. The reason we didn't include the equipment at that same time during that purchase was we were under a deadline to fight off a price increase, which saved the city a little over $25,000. So we're back to you before tonight for that purchase. The new purchase included the engine and not the equipment, as I stated. The new engine that will be replaced is the 1999 Grumman. It's a engine 257. In front of you is the current status of the engine. That the cab is complete and being shipped to the facility to finish the build. The city has 5 engines, 2 frontline engine and 3 reserve engines. Frontline engines are recommended for 10 years of service plus another 5 years of service as a reserve. So a total of 15 years. Engine 257 is currently 32 years old and is the city's oldest engine in use. The problem with this engine, not only being outside that 15 years of service, there's no longer parts available for it. We actually bought the last windshield a little over a year ago in the United States. Engine 57 will be redesignated as the reserve engine once this new engine gets placed in service. The equipment from 257 is dated as the engine itself is older, and new equipment is necessary. There are some smaller items that don't have a per se expiration date, and we'll try to utilize those as we can. We're projecting the cost of the equipment right at $200,000. Some of the equipment, hoses, nozzles, adapters, and then small tools like axes, shovels, brooms, hose clamps. Some of the more expensive items are radios, extrication equipment, the rescue tools, and some of those are the items you see in front of you. That's the Hurst Jaws of Life that are battery powered, some of the struts and airbags used in rescue and extrication. And some of the other larger items for purchase are the self-contained breathing apparatus, which are about $7,500 each. And there's 4 on each piece of apparatus. And then some additional power tools. The current replacement fund, we created the equipment replacement fund and council approved that 2018-2019 budget. We put in $200,000 for 4 years and we've increased that to $490,000 this year. So the beginning balance was about $1.3 million. The new Type 1 engine was $751,000. And with this equipment, an additional $200,000, that leaves us a running balance of about $338,000. I'd be happy to answer any questions if council has any.
Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. I don't see any questions from my colleagues. I will now open this item up for public comment.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm not seeing anyone from the audience wishing to speak on this item. Give me a second. I'll check. I do not have any comments submitted via the website or via email. Mark?
And there's no one on Zoom.
Thank you. I will now ask for a motion from my colleagues.
Pro Tem move to approve item D5 as presented.
Motion presented by Councilman Montes, seconded by Councilman Rodriguez. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it and the motion is adopted.
Thank you, council.
Yeah, so online, could see it here in just a second.
We will now move on in the agenda to item E, administrative reports. We have item E1, an update on the fire hydrant maintenance program. And it's presented by, I believe it was presented by Matt Watson and
Chief Duran.
Chief Duran. Chief Duran. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council, people in the audience, and those visiting us on Zoom. Today, I'm here to speak on another program that we believe is in line with our department's mission of life safety, and following on, if you remember from my last presentation, last council, the SP 1205. But today specifically, we're going to be speaking on the fire hydrant program and how the current status of it and where we'd like to take that program. A little background information. Historically, the inspections and its annual maintenances are done by the fire engine companies that are on duty 24 hours a day, with major maintenance of broken products, or if in case where one gets hit by a car or something like that, the water department handles that higher level of maintenance and repairs. In 2020, due to drought concerns, that program was basically put on hold, but we're at a time being 2 years removed where due to some incidents and other things, we need to reevaluate and bring this program back online. Again, currently, because of the drought and not doing it, we're only doing mandatory maintenance, which is if there's some type of catastrophic event. But unfortunately, those events are something that is readily visible. So if there's a hydrant that doesn't work when we go to use it, we don't know until we need it. With our data that we have right now, we have about 1,900 hydrants. We expect once we start doing this program that we'll actually get more than that when we update records. Our goals, like I said, everything we do here is we're trying to improve or at the very minimum, maintain the life safety, but always elevate the life safety of the community members. With that, a secondary goal is to minimize property damage, and that's anything from individual residences to some of the high occupancies, but also any cultural or historical buildings that are within the city limits. We'd like to preserve those. One of the benefits of a robust hydrant system is that it is a grading criteria in ISO for insurance purposes, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in this presentation. The standard that we'll be utilizing is NFPA 291, and that is because that's one of the standards that ISO refers to. The other added goal, our expected goal, is to be able to update our records and to share those records transparently with the water department, the planning department, the engineering department. Currently, some of those departments do have some GIS records, but we'd like to piggyback on that or improve on those if possible. The program that we, as the fire department, would be taking on is to go out there and GPS the exact location of every hydrant. Again, the engineering department does have some GIS mapping. Theirs is kind of more Google imagery, so it may not be exact. We're going to go out there and capture with GPS the exact location of every hydrant there is. With that, we would also share that information, as I said, with the engineering department, update those records. But the other thing we would create is a shareable drive that has, when we test the hydrant, whatever flow capacity is coming out of that individual hydrant, make sure that that data is available for all that see fit to need that data. The flow testing itself, and there's an example here of a hydrant. We'd paint the hydrants according to NFPA flow rates, which currently, if you drive around the city right now, they're all yellow. So you could have 500 gallons a minute coming out of it, and you could have 2,000. We don't know, but that makes a huge difference for us when we're on emergency scene with different apparatus, which one needs to hook to which hydrant. So we'd like to make that available to make it a little bit more effective in our command decisions on scene. The flow testing itself, we would do it during Monday through Friday business hours of the water department. Again, because we do minimal general services on it. If something were to happen where something breaks, a Stanley valve, or there's a leak, we obviously would like the water department to be able to help us out with that and to mitigate that incident as soon as possible. Again, we'll just be servicing all the parts. And the other thing we'd be doing is adding the blue reflectors in the street that help with visibility at nighttime. ISO, so the Insurance Service Office, what we spoke about, they are basically an agency that goes around and rates all fire departments based on their capabilities. And in turn, insurance companies like Farmers or somebody that you have insurance with, whether it be the city or individual residents, their insurance agents would use that data or that grade on the fire department, and they base their rates on it. So something currently in the city, we're at an ISO of 3. Number 1 is the highest and 10 is the lowest. And we obviously want to be able to maintain that rating, if not improve on it. And the longer we go without testing hydrants, that'll start to dock points on our next grading evaluation. Some of the questions they look at is, exactly, do you have maps? Are they accurate? What's the distance between your hydrants? How often do you maintenance and flow test them? What the rates are, and can they maintain those JPM rates and pressure for a 2-hour flow period. And these tests are basically done at peak hours so that during the highest demand, if your fire system can keep up with an incident during the peak hours. We recognize that we want to do this from 8 to 5. And speaking with water department, currently they estimate that August is generally the greatest peak during the year. We can't always replicate throughout the year, but we would like to have some testing done during that time so that we can validate that information during the peak usage. The maintenance, again, during the water department hours, but the general maintenance is going to be rust abatement, exercise and lube the valve stem, which is basically the top cap of that hydrant where that tool is connected. Inside of that hydrant, there are breakaway parts, and that's why, like, if there's a vehicle accident, one gets taken out, you don't have water ideally going into the street unless something has failed. So we'd like to prevent that. But because those are breakable, sometimes they seize up, and when we go to open them, the amount of force that we have to generate sometimes would break those. And so the more that we can test these systems, or at least exercise the movable parts, the longer those systems will last. From there, again, we would paint them and just update them to the newest and latest NFPA standards. So what are those standards? Well, the NFPA states that if the body of the hydrant is yellow, then that's a public hydrant, and a red hydrant would be private. So if we had any private hydrants in the city, we'd want to identify that and paint that accordingly. Generally, with some private hydrants, sometimes there's some financial impact to the owner if they flow water. They have to pay for that water. So we want to identify during any time what water source we're pulling from, and if there's going to be a burden to a private owner. The distance that the NFPA recommends is 800 feet spacing in residential communities and 500 in all other areas like your industrials and stuff like that. I'm happy to report that the city is well within those standards. We're typically building at 400 in the residential communities and 300 feet in the commercial areas. So for that, we're very well suited. One of the things with this and the NFPA standards is on that ISO rating, 40 of your points, and it's a 105.5 point system, 40 of them is based off of this hydrant program. So with that, you can understand that it is a very valuable resource, the greatest resource we have other than the personnel to put out fires and mitigate emergencies. And we're trying to avoid, unfortunately, what has happened on an incident or so where the engine companies went to hook up to a hydrant. That hydrant wasn't operable, and it delayed the response in terms of actually putting out that fire because we had to change strategy and tactics. So with that, again, we want to minimize that, improve the life safety of the community, and maintain the rating to get the best economic value for the citizens and their insurance companies. And with that, if there's any questions, I'll gladly answer them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for my colleagues? Councilwoman Evans?
Yes, as far as private property, I live in the Meadows, and I was just curious, is it a requirement that the property owner have a private hydrant within the development, or is it not necessary?
Some of those regulations are going to depend on whether a city municipal code or a county municipal code. Some of those are state fire codes. So it's really going to be specific dependent on the general area, but specifically to the type of occupancy or building class that's being built. Unfortunately, I couldn't give you a specific answer for that general area without knowing specifically.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a question from Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Mejia. Chief Duran, when's the next time we're going to be tested on our rating?
I believe that our testing comes up within the next 12 to 18 months.
Really? Okay. Thank you.
I see no more questions. I'm going to open this item up now for public comment.
Mayor Pro Tem, I don't know if anyone, I don't see anyone, I should say, in the audience wishing to speak on this item.
And there's no one on Zoom.
Thank you, Mark. And I don't have any written comments either.
Thank you. I will now close public comment, and it's for informational purposes only. So there's no action requested, right?
Correct, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. for the presentation.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
All right. We will now move along on the agenda. Item F, council member reports, announcements, future agenda items. And would you like to start off, Councilwoman Evans?
Sure. Thank you very much. First and foremost, Merry Christmas, because we won't see anyone between now and Christmas. So I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone. This past weekend, we held our extravaganza, which was just it was just totally awesome. We had probably about 75 to 80 people in attendance, and we collected over 100 toys. We went out into the community on Tuesday, and we passed out, according to the list from Principal Perez, we had 85 students on the list, and we gave out over 150 toys because siblings came out and they also, wanted toys. And you can't just have a child come out and you have siblings and not be able to, bless them with the toy as well. So we woke up with the dilemma of Santa not being able to come. So in the event, I reached out to Chief Lawson and also to Sheriff Pope, and they just blessed us with officers, and we had Mr. Grinch, and the children so enjoyed it, and as well as the officers, they enjoyed themselves. And thank you so very much, Chief. Lori was fantastic. She took the lead and ran with it, and the cadets. So everything turned out very well. So it was really a good event. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Evans. Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. First off, great job on your first meeting as Mayor Pro Tem Mejia. Second, I'd like to give a shout out to the Grants and Parks Department on the Jolly Holly Trolley. What a great turnout. We had Coco with a council member on that night. We had a total of probably 200 people come out, and we served them cocoa and cookies. It was outstanding. And boy, everybody had a great time. It was kind of cold out there. We were bundled. We had Mama and Papa Montez out there with supporting us also. I would like to thank the engineering team for stepping up tonight. Our prayers are with our director, Keith Helmsmark, our engineer who has had a loss in his family. So our prayers are with you tonight and in this time of need. We have many birthdays to celebrate. In December, we had our city clerk, city manager, our attorney, and Mayor Pro Tem Mejia. Happy birthday to all of you. And I'm sure there's many more out there that are our staff and employees. So happy birthday to all of you. And I wish everybody a safe and a Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Montes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem here. So I just want to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And this is our last meeting of the year. We did have a lot of stuff happen and tackled this year, getting a lot better. This is, beginning of my second term, so it's starting off a lot smoother than the first one. So thank you everybody for that. I also did participate in the Jolly Trolley with Councilmember Gallegos and Councilmember Rodriguez. That was a lot of fun. It was very cold. The next day we turned around and we also gave out food for the food bank. So I think there was about 500 people that came out and received food boxes for the holidays, as well as gifts from the CHP. So thank you for all of our partners that participated in that, the food bank, CHP. There's just so many organizations that came out to that. So we appreciate that. And also like to express condolences to our engineer, Keith Helmuth, and he and his family are in our thoughts and prayers. And that's it for me, Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for your patience. I appreciate your patience and also your guidance throughout this meeting. My first meeting, leading this meeting. I would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. And also, I just like to acknowledge and thank law enforcement. I know that during this holiday season, it's a very difficult time with like there's drunk drivers. Hopefully nobody drinks and drives, but I just would really like to say I appreciate it. I know that you had recently, there was increased enforcement. Hopefully nobody drinks and drives and there's no tragedies, but just thank you. Councilman Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I wanted to say, Councilmember Montes, you left out Cynthia Montes that prepared that breakfast for the folks over at the food bank, and that was some really good breakfast. So thank you. And Ryan McWeather, of course, putting that together. I want to say thanks again to Councilmember Gallegos and Councilmember Montes for being at the Jolly Trolley. That was quite cold, but it was a good result there. A lot of folks that came out, gave them chocolate, candy, and the glow sticks, and I think they were very appreciative of what we did. So thank you there. Arnoldo, I did want to ask if we can bring back, again, if my colleagues would agree, to bring back a status on the Measure K, where we're at with cannabis, maybe a calendar as far as when we may be able to see some of the licenses out and what the process will be like. Maybe just a schedule of what we're looking at as far as, you know, when people can expect to see decisions, licenses, and what have you. I think in our next meeting here, and you said January 18th, that'll be appropriate for us to have something there. I too want to wish everyone happy holidays and a happy new year. I wanted to thank Mayor Pro Tem Mejia for running the meeting. Thank you for allowing questions soon after the presentation. Thank you for considering your colleagues. And that being said, I think that's pretty much it. If I left anyone out, law enforcement, Chief Watson, also you, I know this is probably your last meeting, right? So good luck on your new endeavor, whatever that may be, but I know that you'll certainly enjoy it. And with that, that's all I have. Thank you.
So Councilman Rodriguez, are you talking Measure R cannabis?
Did I say Measure K? I'm
yeah, that's
sorry.
okay. And you want to know if we're okay about bringing that back?
Yeah. And that's probably why I saw you go like that. I do apologize, Chief. I'm not trying to pick on you. Measure R is what I meant. Yes, cannabis, and that's why I brought it. Thank you. I don't know why I put cannabis, K maybe together. I don't know.
Because K was with the body cams.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Villegas.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Mejia. First, I'm going to start with the birthday person, Hilda and Arnaldo, and what's the other one? Steve? Happy birthday.
No, it's not my birthday.
All three. Oh, Mayor Pro Tem. Oh, okay. Mayor Pro Tem, happy birthday. And also, Merry Christmas, everybody in the public and all the council members and Mayor Pro Tem. Also, I have last Saturday, the 17th, we have the bike giveaway in the Madera Ford dealer. I was there, so that was pretty good event, all successful. So we give all the bikes. A lot of kids were happy, you know, with new bikes and everything. So that was a great event. That's the second time I attend. So that's a very good event. And I can see a very happy children, all ages. So, and I want to say thank you to Chief Waltons in your new career or life style, whatever you choose. So thank you for the service. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask our city attorney to make the closed session announcement.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Today you have one agenda item under closed session, and that's G1, Public Employee Performance Evaluation under Government Code Section 54957B1, and the title is the City Manager.
pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1, title City Manager, no reportable action.
Okay. The meeting is adjourned at 9 p.m. and I want to thank everyone for your participation in tonight's meeting.
Okay.